Hello everyone, my name is Michelle Caruso. Welcome to my channel where you learn how to get connected and thrive in the film industry. If you're new here, please be sure to subscribe. Today we'll be talking with my friend Amanda, who I went to the same college with and now works in the camera department in Atlanta, Georgia. I can't wait to share a female's perspective on working in camera.
My name is Amanda Ray. I'm a second AC in Atlanta, Georgia. And I'm a brand new mom, so I'm kind of having to switch my brain back to have this talk with you and think about what I do for a living.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I haven't gotten to motherhood yet, but I do hear mom brain is a thing, and I can only imagine.
Pregnancy brain was not a thing. Mom brain is insane.
Yeah.
So I got my start in camera. Kind of when I started at USC, I met you. I was a junior. I felt really behind I'd been an education major. So I was like, okay, I got to hit the ball running, hit the floor running. So I took an internship my first summer at USC on a show called Army Wives in Charleston. And it was just really weird. I showed up on my first day as a set PA, and I met a girl who was there for a summer job, but she has nothing to do with the film industry. And she's like, what do you want to do with your life? I said, well, I really want to work in camera, but I know it's impossible, but that's my dream one day. And she's like, well, come with me. Let me introduce you to someone I met in camera. His name's Jackson McDonald. And he was like, do you know how to do under over with cable? And I was like, yeah, sure. And he handed me the world's heaviest cable. To this day, have never had to wrap a cable like that except on that show. Botched it severely. But he's like, hey, I think you'll be a great fit. You can come be our intern starting next week. So for the whole summer, I was the camera intern, returned the next summer as an intern, and they hired me on the last 2 weeks of my summer. And the people that I met on that show brought me to Atlanta. And through that connection, I started working here, and it's just kind of evolved ever since. So fortunately for me, but unfortunately for giving advice, I got in really easy. Mm-hmm. And I'm very grateful for that. And I definitely understand that is not the case for a lot of people.
Well, and also something that I picked up when you were telling that story is, they kind of tested you on your first day of, do you know how to do over under, something that you could take the time to learn on your own, and you knew it, so that helped you get invited back. I think that's huge.
Right. Well, it also scarred me because that entire summer I would wake up sitting up in bed wrapping cable in my sleep. So
wax on, wax off.
Exactly. But it worked out.
Yeah. Awesome. And what types of roles have you had in camera and as you've progressed throughout camera?
Sure. So I pretty much took, I think, one job here in Atlanta as a camera PA, and that position kind of went away because it's non-union. And on that job, I met the union rep, and he said, if you officially move here and get your license, give me a call. So I got in the union as a utility and did that for way too long, probably 5 or 6 years. Most people do it for a year or two. I was terrified to move up. I was forced to move up, and it was a very good thing somebody did for me. And so I've been a second AC for probably 6 years now.
That's a great lead into the next question of what are the various types of positions and responsibilities within camera?
I feel so I have a very narrow scope of camera in general. I started on Army Wives, which was a episodic TV show. I have not done very many movies, and I have not done reality. It's all been pretty union big shows. So I can tell you what they do, but sometimes on a smaller show, that one position would do way more jobs. But typically on episodic TV, you're going to have the director of photography, who is, they are talking to the above the line people. They do loads of pre-production. They're involved with post-production, the actual, they have artistic presence on whatever you're working on. They're really one of the only positions, I mean, camera operator, but they're still speaking to the DP, but they're the most creative in the department because they get to design the look of the show. They're telling the grips and electrics what they want lighting wise. They're telling the camera operators how they envision the scene being shot. From there, you have camera operators. Usually on a TV show, it's two operators is what I primarily see. And they work with the DP. It kind of depends. The DP might give them freedom, especially if they trust them. Like, okay, you saw the scene, go line up your shot. You know, A camera usually does the wider stuff. B camera gets in and does tight work, which is super fun for the first ACs, which work right below them. First ACs are focus pullers, is their biggest job. I personally think it's one of the hardest jobs on set. It takes a lot. Nobody really knows a position exists unless you work in the film industry, but there is somebody who is solely responsible for keeping people in focus during a scene. And these days, that is the difference between the tip of your nose and your eyeball being in focus. But the camera's moving. The camera could be moving 4 different ways. It could be on a track moving side to side. The operator has mobility within it. The actors don't hit their marks, or they're constant moving. Like, there is so much math that goes into being a first AC, which is why I'm terrified to move up. Like, it's crazy. But they also build the cameras. They are in charge of, the DP will come to them and say, hey, next week we're doing this. I need this kind of gear, blah, 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 blah. You talk to whoever and get me the gear that we need. So they do it all. They're kind of in charge of the schematics of the department. I usually describe it as, if you're in surgery, a second AC, which I'll talk about my job, a second AC has all the gear, but a first AC is using the gear a lot of times, especially the guy that I've worked with the most in recent years. He's going to build the camera and I'm going to just be boom, 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 handing him stuff or adding on tiny little things. But I would have the scalpel, and when someone called for the scalpel, I hand it off. It's that kind of thing. Okay, so a second AC, which is what I do, and I've grown to really love this position, which we'll talk about later. But a second AC, we primarily organize all the gear. We're kind of keeping our carts organized. Gear is insane. There are hundreds of pieces depending on the show. If you're going handheld, studio mode, it's a lot of times a full rebuild of the camera. The more familiar you are and the more access you have to gear, you can make it a more smooth transition. But especially if you're going in for like a 1 or 2 day job, that camera's not dialed in. So you have just a million pieces that you have to keep up with, and it can be really chaotic. So my job is keeping that organized. I know if we're about to go to studio mode that I need to grab this bag of stuff and these accessories and this stuff and take it in there and try to make it as seamless as possible.
And what do you mean by studio mode?
Studio mode is what a camera that's going to be mounted on either sticks or a dolly. It's the opposite of that would be handheld. So, and there's a million ways to do handheld. They've got all sorts of rigs that kind of what is the word? Shifts the gear of the camera. Like they can put it more in their back or whatever, or if you're just holding it. Sometimes those cameras are 40, 50 pounds, depending on the lens and stuff that you get on it. So studio mode is a lot of times a matte box that hooks to these big rods, and there's an eyepiece. You take that off a lot of times when you're handheld and you just go with the monitor because you can get a little more variance. Sometimes when you're studio mode, you can just add like additional things like an extra monitor, but you want to take all that off when you're handheld to make it more lightweight. And you can use bigger filters when you're studio mode and they're really heavy. So sometimes you just switch a lot of gear for studio mode. Another job that a second AC does is probably what most people know. It's like one of the most famous film things is we slate all before every take. So I have the slate and I'm keeping information on there, and it is actually important. It tells you what role you're on, what scene you're on every time. So if you're shooting scene 15, the first setup, no matter how many cameras it is, the first setup is 15 take 1, and then you can do a million takes. Hopefully you don't. But then the second that the camera moves or you change lenses, you go to 15 Apple. And you just add a letter every time you move cameras. So like a very boring, not boring, but like just a traditional scene of maybe 2 people talking, you're probably going to get 6 or 7 setups. Like, you get a lot. I did the show I just did before we had Levi. We went through the alphabet 2.5 times.
Oh my gosh.
It was insane.
So do you go to double A or something when you
Yeah.
when you have to start over?
Yep. You go to double A and then you go to B. Like you change. So B, A, B, C, B, D. Whew, it was a lot. That was a record in 12 years of doing this. I had never experienced that, but the whole episode took place in one room. So it was a lot. And then another thing we do is, at the beginning of every scene, you do a rehearsal. And usually you do a rehearsal, it could be private, where all the crew goes away and just the director and the actors are in there, and maybe the director of photography. They do a private rehearsal. They work out the kinks, where they're going to move around in the room, how they're going to lay out the scene. Then they bring in the crew, and I, as the second AC, would mark the actors. Each actor has their own color tape, and anywhere that they stop, you put a piece of tape down. Go through the whole scene, have it all marked out, and then someone comes in, called a stand-in, stands and recreates the scene. Unless it's a soap opera, you don't just mass light the room. It's little pockets of light. So you light where stuff happens, and sometimes we rearrange those marks to better fit camera angles and backgrounds and whatever. But so that's a big part of it, is the marking. And then below that, you get a couple positions. There's a utility, digital utility. There's a loader. I'm sure I'm going to forget someone. There's a DIT that is not below the second IC. They're like their own technical department that just sits there. Not just sits there. It's a very important job. But they like set the look with the DP. It's way over my head a lot of times, but they set it, and post has the same information, and they're able to like match what the DP wanted, but can also tweak it if they end up not liking the exact look they were going for. A loader loads the film, takes all the stuff we shoot, downloads it, gets it all secure, sends it off to the appropriate people. And a utility is kind of just there, like, to help with anything that you need. I was a utility for a long time. It is a very hard position, because you have an entire department on your back wanting you to get them food or but you also have to maintain batteries, and you're doing so much for so many people, and it's a really hard job. Yeah, that's kind of the gist of a camera department. It's usually about 12 to 15 people. So.
Okay. Yeah, that was a really great breakdown. What knowledge and tools did you need to specifically acquire and learn along the way, or what did you learn beforehand to help prepare you?
Going to school for film is a wonderful, like, the college experience is awesome. I would never trade it for the world. We talked about this. You and I just recently did a Zoom call with the university we graduated from, USC, South Carolina. And the resources you have and the time to be creative is invaluable. And I really didn't take advantage of that or appreciate what we had while we were there. And I do regret that. But you just don't know what you're getting into until you're on set. And Jackson, who got me started on Army Wives, he and I still work together to this day. We talk all the time, like, if we could go back to Army Wives, I would love to do that and see if it was really as hard as it felt at the time, or if it was just my lack of knowledge an understanding of what I was supposed to do. I felt like a chicken with my head cut off for like years. I mean, I was like, I don't know. I grew up in a very just like mellow, no ruffled feathers life, and then just went into this like environment that's like ever changing. So many people have opinions. I didn't know anything about anything. I mean, you get all this great gear at school, but it's not studio level gear. I mean, it's millions and millions and millions of dollars worth of gear on a film set. It pains me to think about how much money it is, especially in the camera department, because cameras go out of date within a year. Like, you get a $80,000 camera, the next year, it's not the best one on the market anymore. 6 months later, it's not the best one on the market. So I think just what I needed was to be there and to experience being thrown into it. And maybe if I'd started on some smaller stuff and worked up, it wouldn't have been so overwhelming. So I went back to school a few years ago and got my master's in teaching. And during that time, I was day playing in the film industry, but on days that I had school, I would go work at the rental house. And it wasn't until I worked in the rental house and I was like, oh, okay, that Y cable we use all the time, there's 27 versions of it. That's why I can never remember what the pins are on the end, is because it changed. And I guess I'm a very hands-on learner. And so I needed to see them all together to realize, oh, crap. There's not just 3 versions. There's 27 ways this cable can be made. So yeah, I think I personally think I was one of the slowest people to catch on to what I do. It's embarrassing to think back at just how it wasn't natural for me. It was not natural at all.
Well, you fooled me. I never would have known.
Good.
But yeah, that's a great takeaway. So it sounds like, just surround yourself with, whatever level equipment you want to be working with, if you want to go to the studio level or, like you were saying, reality TV. And that's the thing with, the film industry. There's just so many different avenues that people can go down. Have you been exposed to like other types of projects besides features and TV? Like, did you spend any time in reality or commercials or music videos?
I have done a handful of music videos, a handful of commercials. And I was on the roster for South Carolina to Film Commission to like get calls as a PA. So there was a summer where I got called to go be a PA on a HGTV show. And I loved that channel so much. And I was like going through a rough time. So I went. Only job I ever had to interview for was a set PA. I was already a union camera person.
Wow.
And I went down there, got the job. And it was great because they just needed like hands, but I knew camera. I understood the lighting. Like I was in it. But yeah, it was, I don't know. Oh, and I did a reality show, a cooking show, maybe whenever that last big snowstorm we had was.
Oh, right.
We were up in Hiram, Georgia, shooting Iron Chef. One of the best jobs I ever had. I got thousands of dollars worth of food off of that job, especially because it shut down from the snow and they had to just get rid of all the food. But yeah, that was weird because we went in there and it was like 20 cameras and I didn't know anything about them because they were like zoomy, like, I mean, I don't know how to describe it. They were the kind of cameras your dad would use in the 80s. Like it was not what I was used to. I was used to way more complicated systems. So I did not understand it. And my operator was so mean to me. Like, I mean, so mean to me. Like everyone was very worried about me. And if it had been a longer job, HR probably would have had to get involved. But I was like, I'm sorry. Like I've never, and it only took me half a day to realize like, oh, okay. Like it really is just this simple. And so then the next day I came in and I was in charge of like 3 or 4 cameras, I think. And I came in and had everything done because that's what I'm used to doing is doing everything on the front end to make it a seamless day. So he came in and he's like, okay, we got to get this camera back up with this battery. I'm like, already done. Got it on. I've already, like, it's ready to go for you. As soon as you want to step over there, it's ready. I put media in, and he's like, what? And he got mad because, like, I had already learned the system and worked. And I didn't want to be like, well, this is way more basic than what I'm used to. But it is, because that's all they need. And, you know, they don't have focus pullers in that world. They do it all themselves. So that was an interesting experience.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. So it sounds like the major differences are equipment, and then like what you're circling back to what you said earlier of on the, I want to say smaller projects, but just different scale projects of often you'll be wearing more hats.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and even, I mean, it kind of does that on other stuff. I mean, even just the job I had, I found out we were expecting back in March, and then I started a job a week later, and we worked one day and it shut down for the pandemic. So then it was like, okay, well, I was pregnant all through the pandemic and my job came back in September, and I was like, well, I have to work. Like, I need insurance for our family. Got to do this. So I was way too big to be doing, and I was the A camera, second AC, which, like, you work with the gear, like you order gear, and you're kind of supposed to be the person, you and your first, like, that people come to for stuff. And I was like, by the end of it, I literally worked up just to get enough hours for another round of insurance. And by the end of it, I was having Charlie horses in my arms. I didn't even know that was possible, but like, I was huge. I was ready to have a baby. So a lot of people took over position, like jobs for me. And thank God I was with like the best crew ever, and they were so just lovely and helpful and understanding that the pandemic kind of forced my hand to be working really pregnant. But yeah, like people, and sometimes I'm not very good with gear stuff. So a lot of times if there's someone stronger at that enjoys doing it, like we'll shift a little bit of positions, which.
Yeah, I would say even, with my background in art, everyone has their own strengths and it shifts from show to show, and like same thing, like it's just a different workflow, and you learn who's good at what, and then develop a shorthand, and just create a workflow that works for everyone. Can you share an experience where you learned a lesson that has stuck with you?
I've been thinking about this question for like a week, Michelle. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, it's probably not like what you want to hear, but I've been very stubborn throughout I've always kind of had one foot out the door. It was very overwhelming in the beginning. I think when the industry started in Atlanta, or maybe it was just my experience, like I was having a lot of trouble with coworkers, I don't know, being treated unfairly and having some issues with that HR had to step in for, I don't know, you've seen it, young girls coming into this industry that doesn't really have a lot of protocols for that. And I don't know, I just was a victim to some stuff that overwhelmed me, and I didn't know how to handle it for a long time. So I kind of always resented this industry and hated it, but didn't know how to get out of it. And it wasn't till I took a job recently, it was like 2 years ago, that it kind of all came to a head. And I just worked with somebody who previously I'd gotten along with really well, but they had recently moved up. And when you move up, it's kind of vulnerable, because the irony, I was going to say this earlier, B camera gets those harder shots. So their focus is intense. Like you're on 100 mil lens and you have to get the difference between their eye and their nose in focus, and they're moving and it's really dark. It's very stressful. And that's the first, as a focus puller, you go into the B camera spot. So you get like the harder job first. And I was working with somebody and they were new to their position. So they were just taking it all out on me, and I could do no right. It was all overnight shoots. And I was just going home every day crying. And like, I remember sitting in the backyard with Jeremy and had a panic attack. And he's like, hey, you work way too many hours in this business to not find joy in what you're doing. Like, I don't care how you do it. You have to find a way to like what you're doing, or you got to get out, because this isn't healthy for you. Mm-hmm. And I've had the best 2.5 years of work ever since then, because I literally had like bogged myself down so far with just like, that I wasn't able to see even the good moments ever. So now, like, I don't know, it's just been better than ever because I've changed my mindset. And I'm still like, there are some people that passionately love this job way more than I do. But I don't know, that was probably the biggest lesson I've learned. And I know I've learned like actual camera lessons along the way, but that one has really like affected my life the most.
Absolutely. And it's so funny. That's something that I think nearly everyone I've interviewed has voiced. Like, I think all of us feel that, like, oh, I got to have a toe out at least at some points, because it is a very exhausting and a field, not just from the environment, stressful environment, but also some of the personalities that you're working with. And the thing, like I wrote part of this down in an article, the thing that makes it difficult, especially as women in this industry, is that everything's relatively short job as far as like a regular job. Like, we're not working for someone for 5-10 years. It's only 6 months. But
Right.
Whenever, I mean, that's your job. Like, you are working year in, year out. And it's like, it doesn't matter if it's 6 months really, because it's your life, it's your year. And yeah, I think that using the scapegoat of a short-term environment is not good enough.
Right. I will say, so you and I came here around the same time. It was like 2010-ish, 2011. It was, at the time, I was like, oh, I'm leaving Charleston, which is a small, big fish, small pond, moving to a big pond, small fish. Like, but the pond was just a slightly bigger pond. Now it is an ocean. It is an ocean. There are so many people. The film industry here is insane. I think it might be biggest in the world, if not very close. And with that, yes, it's like a little, you really have to get your name out there. I'm so grateful. I don't really have the like, fight for a job, play dirty, get the job from other people kind of thing. But I'm established because I was one of the, like, I mean, there were girls here years and years and years before me, but I was one of the first girls here, like in the grand scheme of what's happening now. So I'm so grateful that my name was out there when it got so full. But my favorite thing about the industry getting so large here is that the personalities have been diluted. Like, oh, we don't have to hire angry, mean person. We can hire this person who's maybe even better at the job, probably better at the job, but they're also lovely to work with and like don't make my life miserable. So I feel like in the last, I mean, just every year it's gotten better and better. And the younger people, not always, but I feel like they really value what they're doing, but also they realize like, no, I want a relationship outside this job. Like, I love my life. If I need to take a day off for a reason, like, I'm going to do that. And that's really what I was looking for from the beginning. And I'm so glad that there's a huge group of people here that agree with that and align with the same values that I have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because Atlanta's blown up so much, we like have that flexibility. We get to choose a little bit more of what jobs we say yes to and which jobs we say no to, because I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but it's like I always know there's going to be another call. And I know not all film markets are like that, but I will say, I mean, I feel like one of the big reasons why Atlanta blew up is because of the streaming services. There's so much more content being made than ever before. So even though I haven't been exposed to as many markets, like even the ones that had less, they all have more. I think that the thing that makes Atlanta different is we have more film specific vendors, like, camera houses, prop houses, the airport. So I think that's why Atlanta's standing out compared to, some other cities, especially in the Southeast.
Right.
But yeah, and if you want to speak to, any challenges that you may have encountered just by being a female in a very male-dominated department, do you feel like you were treated differently or had different challenges than some of your colleagues that were male?
Oh, for sure. A moment that stands out to me a lot is a few years ago, just like a specific story. Um, the head that we use with the camera is probably like 20, 30 pounds. It's massive. You think of tripod heads being those tiny little things, but the ones we use are like massive, made out of, I don't know, they look like cast iron. I mean, they're just thick. And then you have this little plastic handle that screws into the side, and it's got an extendable thing that also just has a little nut. And so it's a huge thing to never hold it by that plastic handle. And so I was handing the head up a ladder to a grip to mount it on a ladder to look over a set. And he grabbed it from me by the handle, and I'm standing stuck under, like could not move, stuck underneath him holding this thing. And I like reprimanded him. I was like, please, like he was a veteran. Like he knew he has grabbed a million heads from people. And I know he knew that that was not okay. And, you know, a girl I met in camera on Army Wives died on set, hit by a train. Like the worst thing that could have ever happened to someone very near and dear to me. So like I take that moment. I'm like, hey, like that wasn't really a safe thing to do. And so I like reprimanded him, not in a rude way, but later that day, we were a day playing camera, so we were not there full time. And there's this thing that's been said since the film days called check the gate. And after you cut, they say, all right, or the ADs usually say, check the gate. And that kind of just means check the clip, make sure you recorded it before we move on. If we need to go again, like we need to know now. Well, on this set, that statement was made, and you were not supposed to act upon it. You were not supposed to check the clip because apparently that can delete stuff. It's false. But somebody got in their head that like they don't want anybody reviewing clips because it's dangerous to the media. And so we heard check the gate, and my first AC goes up and checks it, and that same grip came over and started yelling at my camera crew. And so I just, I don't know, I was annoyed, I guess, but I went over to the main guys, the full-time camera guys, and I was like, hey, if that, like, that is a very traditional statement to hear, and we know what you're supposed to do when you hear it. So if that's not the case on this set, and y'all failed to mention it to us, which is fine, that's fine, like, we won't do it again, no big deal. Yep. But, like, can you not, like, it's not okay that someone from another department is coming and yelling at us for something that we're supposed to do when we hear those words. And so then I hear everybody in the department calling me crazy and saying that I'm like going off being this wild, dramatic person. And I was like, I'm not. I'm just like, I just like protocol. Like I want people to stand up for the rights of the people in my department. I don't like brown nosing. I like the order of like, it's supposed to be this way. Mm-hmm. And that didn't happen. And I was just like, hey, like, if this isn't what we're supposed to do, can you tell us? And they just were like calling me crazy. And someone very dear to me called me crazy. And I was like, you're doing that because I'm a girl. I'm the only girl in the department and I'm speaking up. And so instead of saying like, wow, she's like super confident and you're calling me crazy. And I feel like I've had that for years. Yeah. I remember, I'll be quick, but there's another time back when I was a utility and they called a snack to Crafty and everybody left set. It was pitch dark's Vampire Diaries. Pitch dark set. Cameras are still cabled at that point. Now everything's kind of wireless. But I was plugging in a camera and I walked away and I heard something sliding behind me and I turned around and the camera is sliding off the table. Which meant it's not a dolly grip there who normally like watches the camera when it's handheld. There was no first AC. There was no operator. Nobody was nearby. And I ran over and grabbed the camera from falling off the thing, which it was my fault. I had tripped over the cable. But I got on the walkie and was like, hey, can we like maybe keep an assistant on set? Like this almost happened. I was trained that there's always somebody on set. You never just, the whole department never walks away. Yeah. Even though I was there, an assistant is always on set. And they got on the walkie and were like, oh, Amanda can't be a team player, and went off. And at the time I was very emotional and I cried. And so they came up to me later and one of them was like, hey, what's upsetting you? I saw that you were upset. And I thought they were coming to me as a friend. So I said, well, this happened, and the way that y'all responded to me, like, really hurt my feelings. Like, if I'm not part of this team, I'm spending 80 hours a week with y'all, 10 months out of the year. If I can't, like, come to you when something scary happened, like, what am I here for? And he was like, well, you're kind of the bottom of the barrel. So you just have, like, everything just comes down to you and you just have to deal with it. And I was like, I was raised that nobody is the bottom of the barrel, but thank you for just calling me the bottom of the barrel. Jeez. So I don't know. That's probably why I've been really over it at times. But the person that I work with primarily now, Chris Larson's, like, just, he would never, ever talk to somebody like that. And so I cling to him, and it's been great. So you just gotta find your people.
Yes. I think, so I have this article that's kicking around my head of, like, what does paying your dues mean? And I feel like that's part of it, is just, like, figuring out how to identify the good people of, you know, I honestly think that's what it is, because like you were saying with Army Wives, it's like, was it really that hard, or just were we, I don't know. It's really hard to look back, because like you said, like, maybe if we had known more, it wouldn't have been that hard. But
Right.
then at the same time, it's like, God, there are just some really brutal personalities that I just avoid like the plague when I can.
And this might be a generalization, but I've kind of always, like, I've never looked that far outside of the kind of shows I work on, because I always noticed the bigger personalities were on the huge shows that made it to movie theaters, Marvel and all those, like, and I don't know the case now. I'm speaking for, like, when I was first here. But I kind of avoided it because those were the intimidating people. And I'm like, man, I can make the same money, do the same job, but have a little more pleasure. I'm going to stick over here. But there's certain, like, some people work with the scary people because they want their names in the credits and they want those big IMDb credits. My IMDb is very unimpressive because I've been a day player for years, and just recently, like in the last few years, started taking full-time jobs. So, like, I have, like, tiny little snippets of things, been working for years on lots of things, but I was never the full-time guy. But, like, that doesn't matter to me. I don't, people are like, who famous have you met? I'm like, I have
I
to
hate
really
that
think
question.
about that. Like, I don't, yeah.
Yeah.
Once you're in this, that doesn't matter anymore. But I mean, well, to some people, I feel like it does. I do feel like there's a realm of people who want the big jobs so they can get the big glory. But I would rather do the job that I enjoy and get to come home and prioritize my home life.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think that there's definitely a group that chase the big ones, and it's also frustrating of, yeah, like people that, talk to me that are outside of the film industry of like, oh, what stars have you met? And they want to hear like all these impressive stories, and then like in some ways, like, I want to say I feel like a failure, but I'm like, I'm just not going to be very impressive to you.
Right.
But then and also like looking at my experience on, working on something smaller versus something bigger, like honestly, between a work-life balance, yeah, the smaller ones are better for that. But honestly, like I learn more at times, because since it is so segmented, the bigger you go, I kind of like wearing more hats and, learning different things and having greater responsibility, because when you get really segmented, especially for the type of work that I've been doing, it can be very managerial and administrative, and it just like, that's the part that makes my eyes cross. And I can, and that's the thing, I can work both my left and right brain, which is why I've been able to do so well in art department. But that's also why I like a smaller indie show, because I can work more my creative side and, dig in and get my not hands dirty, but just like get in there. And yeah, I just want people to, really take that lesson away of like, you don't have to work on these big shows to have a really sustaining and in some ways what can be a better career, especially with your work-life balance.
As far as like work-life balance, we talked about this with the students at USC. that one of my biggest regrets is that as soon as I got into union jobs, like I haven't done a single creative thing since then, except like this one time I did a video for Jeremy for his dog. And like I did a driving Miss Daisy video. It was like, took me 7 minutes. I have not done a single creative thing outside of that since college. And so like the whole point of me getting into this business is because I loved the art of it. And now I do the work for other people and don't do anything for myself. And I miss loads of opportunities. There are plenty of people in this business, even on the work. Like I had no excuse. There are people on as big of jobs as I am and bigger who go out on the weekends. They're writing their own scripts at night. They go out on the weekends and they get crew together and they do the fun stuff. And I like just sat in my own misery of working so much and didn't go out and pursue helping people with their projects. And now I'm like, man, I did not do myself a favor in the like mental health department. So my biggest thing for people and biggest takeaway is like, don't lose what you loved about this business. Don't let the people take it away from you. Don't take it away from yourself, but don't let the people get you down and take it away, because you'll wake up 12 years later like I do, just like, why wasn't I doing small projects or whatever for my own joy? And there's so many ways to do that. There are people who are making like legit music videos or just some pleasurable thing for themselves. You're doing this. There's no one way to do it. And I don't know why I didn't. I mean, I know why, but just don't do what I did, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can definitely get lost in the grind. I know I did it, and like you said, like time just flies. And something that I realized even when I was, in my own mental storm of, art department coordinating of, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, is to remember to take breaks. Like I was not one to just like, oh, I got to get the next job as I'm like on my last week of my current job of like, no, I'm going to take at least a month off or 3. But again, I think it goes into paying your dues of just like, I had the flexibility to do that. I could, as a PA when I was starting off, and yeah, there was less work here. Like I definitely had to just say yes to whatever came up. So yeah, and yeah, I think that's a really valid point too, of just keeping your eye on like, why did you get into this industry in the first place? Because it will, I don't want to say misdirect you, but I was not getting into film industry to become an art department coordinator, and all of a sudden I became good at that and known at that, and it's like, wow, how did I get here? It makes sense looking back, but yeah, I think that's advice that I'm looking to pass on to, is just like, just remember why you got in and don't get swept by the current. Like you gotta keep your footing and know what you want to do.
I remember I think it was my first day on Army Wives. It might have been like within the first week, but I walked into the DIT tent, which is where usually the DP is in there and the lighting guys are in there, and they're all discussing what the frame looks like and what they want to change. And I walk in there and he goes, hey, like he introduced himself and I introduced myself, and he's like, so what do you want to do? Like, what's your goal? And I was like, oh, I want to be a director of photography. And he looked me in the eyes and he goes, there's no successful female DP in this business. And I like literally latched onto that for years.
Oh.
And it crushed me because I was so just insecure and didn't really know what that meant to be a DP. Now I know, like, at least on that scale, that's never what I would want to do. I don't know. I never even allowed myself to pursue it anymore. He absolutely crushed me. And they all laughed, and like it was a little joke for them. And first of all, that statement is not true. I haven't met many, but the female DPs that I have met, it is an absolute privilege to work for them. And it's a shame that there aren't more. But I worked with him later and he's like, oh, I was kidding. I would never say that. I know X, Y, and Z. They're amazing DPs. And I was like, okay, well, your joke you were a stranger to me. And this is my own insecurities, but you totally changed my, like, I didn't even have the thing that I thought I wanted in the business. I don't know. I just like lost. I believed in him. I guess I believed what he said for way too long. So people need to be way more confident than I was in that moment, and don't listen to people when they say stuff like that to you.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think females that work in film, whether it's a male-dominated department or position, there's insecurities, like you said, that we just come in with. So anything like that is going to hit us different. And yeah, I think over time and just as you get older and more solid in who you are, what you want, and know what you're good at, then that armor is built up. But yeah, I
People
have to
can't
say,
make me
like, as
cry
I,
anymore.
huh?
People can't make me cry anymore, so I know something has changed.
Right. Well, oh, and going back to, your stories of, kind of like the reactionary female of, because everyone's a human being, and females do tend to be more in touch with their emotions. And, I hate the term crazy or bitchy or whatever. It's just like, we can be really firm in the way we speak, because to me, that's being authoritative, that's being clear, that's showing assertion. And then, I don't know, I just want to put out in the world, like, that tone to be a bit more embracing of, like, because as women, we're very often aware and to some extent controlling, or at least monitoring our emotions throughout the day. So it's like, when we have our moment, it's not coming from nowhere. And like you said, you had an experience where, safety on set is incredibly important. And it's like, people just, instead of, deflecting and just pinning it on that other person of like, oh, you're being too sensitive, you're being too this, too that, of like, just be open to listening and shifting in action if you need to, or apologize, whatever it is. I'm sick of people trying to be like, it's a female thing.
Right. Yeah. There's more women on set than I've ever seen, which is awesome. And there are times, like last year, I was day playing out on The Resident, and when I was out there was like 7 women in the camera department. Like, it was insane, and it was awesome. And I think women bring some amazing things to the table that men don't typically have. Now, it's not black and white. I'm never going to say there's not men that can do this, there's not women that can do this. But like, I think, at least from what I see, is women are really good at like problem solving for long term. They're not just looking at in the moment. They're like, it's same with all the stuff I'm reading about raising a child. It's like, oh, you can do this in the moment and fix the problem, but if you handled it this way, you would be you would be altering the course of future problems. And I think women like really bring that to the table, where you're not just looking at the moment, you're looking at the big picture. And if you would just take the time to listen, you might see that. And also just like listening in general, there's a million ways to do something, and sometimes you get so caught up in doing it one way that you forget to see that maybe things have changed, the environment's changed, and you can do it a new way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had a production designer one time say, hey, us old dogs can learn new tricks. And I loved that, because he was open. Like, there's, especially with technology, and especially during COVID, like, our generation, I feel like, is very much relied upon now. Like, I've had to like teach the crew like so many tech things, and like Google Drive, and just how to make things automated. And I think it's just changed their professional and personal life of how they function. So yeah, I think change is good, and it is natural. And just because it's the way it's always been done is not a valid reason of, we gotta be evolving.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. I think, and in camera, like, because it's a very technical department, and the gear is forever changing. Just wireless stuff, even for COVID, like, we had producers and people higher ups that were staying home, and they wanted to be able to see what we were doing live. So we had to like rig all this gear so that they could get basically what we're doing right now, but showing the camera shots for them. And like, you have to stay on top of that. So it kind of blows my mind that I work in a department where the equipment changes like monthly sometimes, but the people will not adjust how they do things. And so you'll be told like, no, we do it this way all the time. I'm like, but like, that was for a piece of gear that like ran film. We don't run film anymore. We use cards. And like, can we maybe just find a way to be a little more efficient and realize that things have changed and we should also change a little bit with that.
What parting advice can you give to anyone looking to work in camera?
There's one thing I want to add to that, and I recommend this to anybody who reaches out to me about getting in the business, is if you get the opportunity, COVID aside, everything's different this year, but if you get the opportunity and you're curious about a department like camera or any department, like your department, it wouldn't work, but a department where you can go to a rental house and see a lot of the gear, call them up one day and say, hey, if there's are you busy today? Could I come in and build a camera? Would you mind if I put my hands on this gear? And a lot of times you have to be in the union probably to do it, just so for liability's sake. But I've gone to the 2 rental houses with people before and just kind of been their person to let them get their hands on stuff. So just don't be obnoxious with reaching out to people, but do reach out and somebody will hook your line and help you out. I hope. I've never heard someone that didn't find someone to help them and kind of mentor them.
Yeah, in my experience is you're going to get a lot more no responses than I don't think I've ever gotten a flat out no. But like you said, I think it takes a while and consistency to just keep asking multiple people of, any question of, hey, like you said, can you come with me to a rental house so I can, learn the equipment more, or can I shadow you for a day? Just whatever it is you're looking for, and also be open to what opportunity they can offer you.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
Don't be the intern I had last year that just went and slept in our camera lockup and slept all day, because you're not going to get hired by us. A lot of times if somebody takes the time to help you, or if they see you in a rental house and you meet people in the rental house who are prepping a job, they're going to give you a call to come out on their set because you impressed them that you were there on your off time working with gear. I see that happen all the time. I have worked on probably 10 jobs where we hired somebody that was in the rental house checking out gear and just seeing if anybody needed help during their prep. We hire them on as a thank you.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing for G&E, Grip, and Electric of they just want to see that you're getting exposure to the gear, you know how to use it safely and correctly. And yeah, I think that's a really valuable tip is, go to the rental houses and learn it. Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, Amanda. This was all really helpful.
Yeah, thanks for having me.